In this video, we're going to cover a general overview of the digestive system. So we're going to start by looking at the major stages or functions of the digestive system, and then we're going to get into the major organs of the digestive system, starting with the alimentary canal and moving into the accessory organs of the digestive tract. So let's start with the functions of the digestive system. We know that there are 5 steps or 5 stages of digestion that are going to involve ingestion, digestion, absorption, compaction, and defecation. So ingestion is where we take in the food into the mouth. Digestion starts in the mouth as we start to chew the food, but it will continue throughout the stomach and the small intestine as well. This is where we are going to both physically and chemically break down the food into smaller nutrient components that we can then absorb and use throughout the body. So the digestive process actually consists of 2 parts. We have what's called mechanical digestion, which is where we're physically breaking the food down into smaller particles. This happens in the mouth whenever we are chewing food with our teeth, we're breaking it or grinding it into smaller parts. We can also see mechanical digestion in the stomach and in the intestines when we are churning or physically mixing that food around. It's going to help physically break down or mechanically break down those larger food molecules or food particles into smaller particles that are more easily digested. Now, after the physical or mechanical digestion, we also see chemical digestion as well. So this actually starts in the mouth as well, but most of the chemical digestion is going to happen in the small intestine. And this is where we have enzymes that will play a role in helping to break down chemical bonds in those food groups that we are eating. So there are different types of enzymes produced throughout the digestive tract. We have some produced in the salivary glands, which will help break down some of the large complex carbohydrates in the mouth as they get mixed in with our saliva. We have some enzymes produced by the stomach, which will help digest things like protein. And we have other enzymes produced by the pancreas and the small intestine to help digest other food groups chemically. So this chemical digestion will really help us break these smaller food particles into tiny nutrient molecules that we can actually use or absorb into the bloodstream and then get to our cells. Now, after we have performed digestion, we've gotten all the nutrients broken down and removed from those foods, then we can perform absorption. So absorption is where we take those nutrients up into the epithelial cells of the digestive tract and then get them into either our blood or our lymph, where they can circulate through the body and make it to our cells and provide those nutrients to our cells. After absorption, the next stage is compaction. This is where we will absorb water from that waste material that's left over, and we will consolidate that indigestible waste into a form called feces. And then the last step of digestion, or of the digestive system function rather, is defecation. So this is where we remove or eliminate that feces, that waste material that's left over at the end of this process. So now let's look at the general anatomy of the digestive system. So we first have what's called the digestive tract, also known as the alimentary canal, and that's going to be these hollow organs that food will travel through, starting at the mouth and ending with the anus. So looking at the general digestive organs or digestive tract, it's going to include the mouth, the pharynx, the esophagus, which travels posterior to the trachea. Finally, we get down into the stomach, then the small intestine, then the large intestine, and then out through the rectum and the anus. So all of those organs would be considered part of the alimentary canal because these are organs that the food will pass through as it is being digested and as those nutrients are being absorbed into the body. Now we also have some accessory organs that will aid in the digestive process, but we don't necessarily have food passing directly through them. So some accessory organs of the digestive tract are going to include your teeth, your tongue, your salivary glands. All of those are found in this mouth area. We also have the liver, which will produce some digestive enzymes for us. We have the gallbladder, which will produce bile, not produce bile, sorry, the liver will produce the bile. The gallbladder will actually be used to store the bile, And bile is a substance that's going to be helpful for us in digesting fats or lipids from the foods that we eat. We also have the pancreas, which you can see a little bit of here sitting behind the stomach. It will also produce some digestive enzymes for us as well to help aid in the digestive process. So these accessory organs, again, are not organs where we see food moving through them, but they're going to produce other secretions like enzymes, for instance, or other digestive secretions that aid in that digestion process. So let's look at the layers of the digestive tract, and you'll see that there are 4 major layers that make up these hollow digestive organs that are part of the alimentary canal. So the innermost layer is called the mucosa, and you can see it colored in this pink color here. Most of the digestive tract, that mucosa layer is going to be made of simple columnar epithelium. So mainly starting at the stomach and going through the large intestine, that mucosa is going to be made of simple columnar epithelium because we're going to see a lot of absorption happening through that layer. But if you are looking in the mouth or the esophagus or the close to the anus, you would actually see stratified squamous epithelium in those areas because those areas are going to be much more subject to friction or abrasion. The mouth and the esophagus being that you're going to be swallowing food, and that's going to create friction in those organs, and then the anus is where the feces, that more solid feces, will be leaving the body, creating friction there. So those areas again will have stratified squamous epithelium forming this mucosa layer, but the stomach, the small intestine, large intestine will primarily contain simple columnar epithelium forming this mucosa layer here, this innermost layer, which lines the lumen. The lumen is the opening or the hollow space inside of these hollow organs. Now outside of the mucosa, we have what's called the lamina propria. This is a little thin layer of connective tissue that is outside of that mucosal layer. And then outside of the lamina propria, we will have what's called the submucosa, which is this thicker layer of connective tissue in white here. And in that submucosa, this is where we're going to find a lot of the blood vessels of these digestive organs. We're also going to see some lymphatic vessels in this submucosal layer and some nerves, which are going to be supplying nerve impulses to these organs to tell them when to contract. Now, outside of the submucosal layer, we then have what's called the muscularis externa, which is colored in pink here. It's very thick, as you can see. It's actually made up of 2 layers of smooth muscle. We have an inner layer here called the circular layer, and in the circular layer, these smooth muscle cells are arranged in a circular pattern around the tube, okay, so around this hollow tube. The outer layer of smooth muscle cells are arranged longitudinally along the length of the tube. So this is called our longitudinal layer, is this outer layer. And those 2 layers, when they contract, when this inner circular layer contracts, it causes constriction of the lumen of this hollow organ, which pushes the material in one direction. This outer longitudinal layer, when those cells contract, is going to cause a shortening of this tube, okay? So we're going to see constriction of the tube and shortening of the tube at the same time, which ends up creating this wave-like type of contraction that we call a peristalsis contraction. So this is a unique type of contraction that we really only see in smooth muscle, and we see it a lot in these digestive organs that are needing to move material through the lumen of these organs. Now, outside of that muscularis externa layer, we then have what's called the serosa, which is a thin layer of tissue made of simple squamous epithelium with a little bit of areolar tissue inside of that. So we have some areolar tissue, and then we have a thin layer of simple squamous epithelium covering that, forming this serosa layer. This is a nice slippery coating on the outside of these digestive organs. There's a lot of serous fluid on the surface to help reduce friction and to provide lubrication between all of these organs. You'll also notice that there are lots of nerve supply in these digestive organs. So we have 2 different sets of nerves sending stimuli to these digestive organs. We have what's called the myenteric plexus, which is part of this muscularis externa layer, stimulating those smooth muscle cells. And then we have the submucosal plexus, which is part of the submucosal layer, stimulating a lot of the tissues and structures within that layer and telling these organs, how to produce their secretions and how to contract and when to contract, things like that. So this is going to regulate secretions in these organs and also help maintain optimal pH so that we have optimal enzyme functioning in these hollow organs. Now we also have structures associated with these digestive organs called mesenteries. Mesenteries are connective tissue sheets that are used to kind of hold these organs together and suspend them from the abdominal wall. So we have what's called the lesser omentum, is one of these that you can see here, which is going to attach the stomach to the liver and kind of hold it in place. We also have the greater omentum, which hangs down from the posterior surface of the stomach over the surface of those intestines, kind of holding them in place. You can also see some fat or adipose tissue helping to form that greater omentum there. Along with that, we also have the mesentery. Mesentery of the small intestine, which helps hold all of these organs in place, prevents them from mixing all around and keeps them in place. It also helps hold them to that posterior body wall and prevents them from shifting in that abdominal cavity. So again, you have the greater omentum here hanging down under the stomach. You have the lesser omentum above the stomach, holding the stomach in place and attaching it to the liver. And then we have these mesenteries here, which are going to help hold all of the small intestines together and prevent them from shifting or moving around in that abdominal cavity.